Despite the millions of players playing TFT, only around the top 0.1% will reach Challenger, and here is why. It's not because of some secret tips or comps that you're missing out on. They're not all just blanket high rollers.
Oh my!
Oh
Dude,
my
it's
What?
god.
great,
It's great,
great.
it's great.
And they don't just all abuse the same comp. Well, mostly speaking. Players who consistently make Challenger every set, for the most part, have very good fundamentals. TFT is a complicated game, but improvement doesn't need to be. Mastery of your fundamentals can take you to Challenger very easily, and of course you might have heard this before, but in this video I wanted to explain the justification a little bit more, as well as go into how you can improve your fundamentals. I'm currently in my final year of my economics undergraduate, and I recently came across O-ring theory, which aims to explain strong complementarity between inputs. It essentially follows the logic that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The theory goes to show that high-profit firms will invest highly into all areas of production, because lower inputs at any stage can have catastrophic consequences. Now, bear with me, this does relate to TFT. So take Google for example. They pay highly for not only their top CEOs, but also for their top cleaners, chefs, managers, and everything else in between. This is because if you consider all inputs as a function of the final product, the loss in quality is multiplicative, not additive. Now, if we take these 5 inputs and give them a rating of, let's say, 90% effectiveness, this is only 10% off their potential, but they multiply to give 0.9 to the power of 5, which is 59% for the final productivity of Google, which is a 41% drop in quality despite the fact that the average is as high as 90%, and it only gets worse if any of the individuals fall by more. If you consider your fundamentals in TFT as the inputs, you can consider your final ranked similar to the product. And it becomes immediately clear that you shouldn't be worrying about advanced concepts when you still need to clean up your basics. This is because even a 10% quality drop in any one of your fundamentals multiplies with the other ones to give you a much worse off performance overall. So now that you know mathematically why fundamentals are so important, I'm going to be going over what I believe are 5 of the most important. There are other factors of course, but if you struggle with any of these 5s, then I really think you should actively try to work on them every single game. A good approach is to focus on one at a time if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, but then you can start to spread your focus as different ones require less attention. I'll give you some examples of how to actively practice them, but some general advice is to watch other streamers and compare what you would do with what they're doing. You can also read guides and watch them on YouTube and take notes on your own games after you either win or lose. Economy or econ management in TFT is really important because you need to alter your board strength and constantly be thinking about when you should be investing your gold and by how much. There's rarely a perfect answer for how you should play every single spot, as there's different play styles. However, there are a lot of general rules that are objectively correct that you should be following. A lot of people still make these mistakes of not following them, despite the fact that most of them are publicly available. The first one is the importance in making your first 10 gold. Everyone knows that compound interest is a thing in TFT, so making your first 10 is really important if you're holding on to garbage pairs. Dropping to 30 gold and leveling to pay an extra unit is almost always the play, especially when you have a streak, as this saves a lot of HP and it only costs you 3 gold. I see a lot of people greeding and sticking on 50 gold when they really don't need to be, as they could be leveling up early. Leveling patterns are pretty standard unless you're playing a reroll comp. Most of the time you're going to be 4 on 2-1, 5 on 2-5, 6 on 3-2, 7 on 4-1, 8 on 5-1, and ideally going 9 as soon as you're stable. Don't pre-level if you're holding on to pairs at 2-1, but do it if you need to try and hit higher cost units, especially 3 cost odds. Understand the average goal to hit and the value of rolling for pairs, as most people don't roll on 6 even though they're sitting on a lot of pairs, or if hitting one specific 3 cost unit would boost their board strength, then it can be very valuable to roll just a little bit at different points throughout the game. Most players understand leveling quite well, but they fail to know the value of rolling a little bit for strength or when to all in. Usually this is most common on level 7, as you don't need to overroll on level 7, but most of the time it's smart to just roll a little bit if you need to hit some upgrades. And there of course are going to be games where you need to all in or at least drop down to 20 gold at 7 if you're just low rolling on your roll down. This also comes into play if you have no reason that you're going to spike that much harder at 8 and you're already on low HP. Follow patterns and always question top challenger players on Twitch as to why they make decisions that you might not have made, and this way you can increase your economy management skills. At the end of the day, you're trying to balance HP loss with gold loss, and there's really one correct answer, so you need to follow the basics whilst also questioning your specific spot and applying the knowledge that you have. Next up we have strongest board. The basics include having a strong mix of frontline and DPS. This comes from your units but also your augments and items, and if you have augments that complement each other, you can make a board which is lopsided towards one. If you're lacking in one area, you can use items such as Zezerot to aid a lack of frontline, or Sunfire to aid a lack of DPS. Try not to get caught up in the synergies, as you need to be looking at unit strength, especially during the early and late game. Early game, this means playing around 2-star units that you hit, as sometimes a 2-star unit can be better than having a synergy if that's all that you have. Mid game, you prioritize synergies a little bit more as they are important, and late game, it's usually using high value units where synergies can sometimes be a bait. So stage 2, a random 2-star Camille plus 1-star Darius might be more valuable than, let's say, a Poppy and a Darius if they're both 1-star. Bodyguard does very little here if neither of them are going to be surviving very long anyway. Late game, the Bodyguard synergy again isn't very much needed, as a lot of the time it's important to run a Braum 2 as your frontline, but he doesn't necessarily need Bodyguard if he's only going to cast once or twice anyway. Hence you'd rather have something like a Silco over a Darius to support that Braum. Building strongest boards comes down to a lot of practice and experimenting, but if you watch streamers and you stay up to date with what units are objectively better in certain patches, then it becomes a lot easier. It's rare that a patch will have perfect balance, and there's always boards that seem to dominate the early, mid, and late game. But always keep in mind the value of 2 stars early and the value of value units late game. Moving on to mental, one of the least technical to improve, but still extremely difficult. We often only tilt because we care about winning and our rank. So as soon as you convince yourself that you're playing to improve as a player and that the rank doesn't actually matter, you'll improve in the long run with your mental significantly, as well as making yourself a better player. Getting lucky doesn't mean anything in the short run. If you want to get better as a player, you need to understand that some games aren't winnable and you should play accordingly. Focus on every loss as a learning point and objectively look at your mistakes rather than getting too worked up about them. Have a similar approach to wins so that you don't get too hyped, as it'll make the losses worse when you have emotional joy attached to your wins, because obviously the opposite's going to return when you get unlucky. If you have a bad streak, always take a break. Try not to tilt Q. Go do something IRL, make some food, go for a walk, I don't know, even touch some grass. Something as simple as a breathing exercise can bring you right back into your mental game. Simply put, anger weakens our decision making. Top players learn to control it by objectively thinking about the highly variance game that is TFT that we all know and love. And fourth, we have itemization. In most comps you need to have 3 items on the carry, ideally 2 to 3 tank items and maybe 1 to 2 utility. Not having 3 carry items is a really big deal because of how damage multiplication works, and usually you're going to be stacking this on one unit in particular. This doesn't mean that we only go after offensive items, as lacking frontline items can hurt just as much, and depending on the set we'll be prioritizing between front or back first, but a strong balance is always going to be consistent throughout all of the balance patches. However, it gets more complicated than that. Knowing when to slam versus greed is another part. Itemization is about saving HP. A good way to think about it is that slamming a 5 out of 10 item immediately is the same as slamming a 10 out of 10 item halfway into the game, as you'll be saving roughly the same amount of HP. High elo players know how to play around item components as well, because making the items that work but leaving you with poor leftovers can doom you later down in the road. For example, slamming IE when playing strikers with a glove left is fine, as you're still going to need a last whisper. However, if it leaves you with nothing, you can often justify greeting and holding onto that glove because you know how vital last whisper is in that specific comp. Knowing what to make should always come down to 2 things, what you're planning to play and what you're currently playing. There's no point in slamming items that do little to your board now or later. There are some extreme cases, such as an early Sunfire slam, which does a little later but insanely helps your early tempo, and you can almost always justify this if you're going to get a good win streak out of this. And on the other end, you could justify slamming a Deathblade even if it doesn't do too much early if you know you're going to be going for a 3-star unit such as Ashe reroll, because it'll insanely help you once you hit. But generally speaking, you need to balance the HP preservation now and for the future. Most guides have itemization for all champions, and depending on your board and where you're heading, you can make items that generally speaking match both. This is why it's extremely important that your strongest board consists of units which easily transition into your final comp, so that the itemization isn't too difficult. But remember that if you want to take your itemization to the next level, you do need to be thinking about what your future item drops might be and playing around your half components. And finally we have positioning, which is knowing how units interact not just based on their position but also with their abilities. There's something unique about every champion, however there are a lot of core rules and things that you should be following. The most obvious is the front to back, so you have your tanks at the front and your DPS units at the back line. Then there's targeting, so solo frontline, if strong enough to survive until the others walk up, can be really important, especially during the early stage when you have units such as Camille and Darius which have built-in healing, so if you have a 2-star of them it can often be better to solo frontline them during stage 2. When frontline is split, tanks go on the outer edges as these are the ones that are going to take the most focus. A bodyguard protects your carries from sins as they actually have a built-in taunt. You want to be positioning diagonally opposite for a lot of your ranged attacks, especially notable for Jhin and Zeri as they get the sniper bonus and they can often take out the carry before the fight even starts. Every single unit has different interactions and it's going to change for set 7 again. Just focus on scouting, and every time your unit gets out positioned, take it as a mental note and always be looking to improve. Challenger players on Twitch will probably position differently to you, so make sure you're questioning that and trying to change it and adapt to your own gameplay. Most players are probably missing out on the lesser known ones which come from active research into each individual champion or just by luck when watching streamers as you can see how they position. And that is the end of the video. I want to thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy learning about why fundamentals are so important and how you can maybe go about improving them. I want to apologize for my voice. I am still sick, but I didn't want to put this video off any longer than I already have. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and if you want to have a live discussion, then make sure to go check out my Twitch as we can chat there. At the time of posting this video, I am currently going to be going live on Twitch, so feel free to come say hello. But other than that, that's all from me guys. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.